Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're going to take a few minutes to allow people to join the session, and we'll wait for the numbers to stabilize before we start. Good, I think the numbers are starting to stabilize. Panelist speakers, are you guys ready? Can I get a thumbs up? Good, thank you very much. So good morning and welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Today is the 7th and final installation of the Developing Developers series of webinars that we launched almost 6 months ago. And today we'll be focused on managing, operating, and maintaining renewable energy assets. For those of you who don't know me, I am Nivesh Govender, the COO at SAPVIA, the Solar PV Industry Association. And thank you again to all of you who have been following the series since the start. And thank you to those who have joined today. You are indeed in for a treat. A big thank you to the sponsors, Hamilton Renewable Energy for sponsoring today's webinar. Mainstream Renewable Power and Juvi Renewable Energies for sponsoring this series of webinars and providing the opportunity for more participation in these important discussions. So with 112 renewable energy projects built and 200 billion invested and over 52,000 gigawatt hours of clean energy generated over the last 10 years, performance of renewable energy assets have become extremely important. While optimally operating and maintaining assets leads to better performance, ensuring the best outcomes for renewable energy projects actually begins at project development stage. And some may say this never ends. Today we are going to be discussing with our esteemed panel of asset managers the technical and operational challenges faced both by wind and solar PV assets. They will also be highlighting some of the solutions and learnings to better manage renewable energy assets. We will also touch very briefly on the opportunities within the area of operation and maintenance for more local participation. I think what's important to note today is that we have changed the format of the session. If those of you have been following us for the series, today's format is slightly different. We will be having one presentation from Ms. Chanda Kumalo, who will be highlighting the asset management fundamental principles. And then we will move to a facilitated panel discussion, which will be led by my co-host, Ms. Ntombi Futin-Tuli. Please can I ask participants to post your questions in the Q&A section. Lindo will be filtering through these questions and he will select those questions that will be asked live. So what does this mean for you? We will activate your mic and you will be able to engage with the panelists directly and pose your question. The content prepared today by the speakers are planned to be useful and informative as usual. I hope that you will enjoy the session. Please can I ask you guys to stay even post the discussions as we will be announcing the new webinar series over the next 6 months. So without further ado, let me start by introducing our first speaker, Ms. Chanda Kumalo, who is the Director of Hamilton Renewable Energy, and she is the spokesperson and board member of SAPVIA. Her bio is available. It should have been displayed, but I see it's not, but it was in the emails and we're happy to share it with you after the session, so I won't go into too much of detail. So Chanda will be presenting on the fundamentals of managing renewable energy assets. Over to you, Chanda.
Thanks, Nivesh, and hello to everybody that's joined us. I got a little bit carried away preparing for this, so I've got far too many slides and not enough time. So I'm going to whiz through them. Hopefully you well, you'll get them afterwards, so you can read some of the slides. And if you have questions as we're going through, then you can pose them during the panel discussion. Kim, I won't go into too much detail about Harmattan. You'll have these slides. We're a technical consultancy that's operating in the renewable energy space. You can keep going, Kim. It's fine. I don't think we need to dwell on this. What I did want to start with is from both a SAPVIA and a Harmattan point of view, the Africa edition of the best practice guidelines for O&M for solar PV were launched last week. So SAPVIA and Harmattan have both contributed to redrafting these along with Solar Power Europe and a whole lot of other parties. So you can download them either on our website or the Solar Power Europe website, but please do go take a look. It's an interesting read for those of you getting into this space. Okay, Kim. Okay, so I've been asked to go through the fundamentals of O&M and managing assets across both wind and solar, which is a mammoth task. So what I've done is steal some bits from those best practice guidelines and just so that we can clarify what's normally meant by O&M, because it's quite a wide topic. So the understanding of it is it comprises asset management, which we'll go into detail about what falls under that, comprises operations of the project and also the maintenance of the project. And I think all of these are separate topics and separate areas that people work in, but often get lumped into one, and then things fall between the cracks about who's responsible for different areas of this. So it's very important to just be clear who is responsible for what. Next slide, please, Kim. And why is O&M important? So we spend a lot of time and stress looking at developing projects and getting projects online, but actually the development and the construction phases are really the shortest phases in the life of a project. You're operating this plant for 20, hopefully as lifetimes increase, up to 30 years. And the contracts that we sign during the development phase and financial close have to cover this whole life cycle. So it often gets neglected or pushed to the side because it's a different set of people and skill sets that are managing it, but really it is a very important part of the life cycle of the plant. Okay, Kim, next slide. You can keep going. I'm going to just go into a little bit of an overview about the O&M contract itself and what we're trying to do with a contract. And essentially that's to set out the obligations for the different parties very clearly from the beginning. So employer to pay the bills, contractors to provide the equipment. And sorry, some of these will jump between wind and solar. Apologies, I tried to make them technology agnostic, but clearly missed it here. So with the turbine supply agreement and then the services or the O&M. And what is really the most important is it sets out the risk allocation between the parties. So if something happens or goes wrong, if things cost money, more money than expected, who is responsible for payment and remedying of those issues? Okay, Kim. And I've just set out here the different parties and the different types of agreements. So you can have a management agreement, then the O&M agreement specifically for the equipment. And underneath that, you'll have the contractors, either third party or the original equipment manufacturer. Under the operations management agreement, you'll often have the operations manager who's responsible for balance of plant maintenance and also for the financial and commercial management of the plant. Okay, Kim. In the operations and maintenance agreement, you need to, basically, again, we're saying setting out the duties of each party with regard to the maintenance period. And ideally, the contractor fixes anything that breaks immediately. And if not, that they are liable for payment for any of the production lost on the plant. In reality, this is constrained by their availability of staff and spare parts. So what you want to clarify, and I've just put some key points in here under the O&M agreement, and we'll go into a bit more detail of them later, is when does it start, which seems seems obvious, but can actually be something that trips you up. Does it start when your first equipment goes online, so your first turbine? Does it start when your whole plant goes online? Who's responsible in between that period, from the first to the last, if not? So being very clear about the start date is quite important, and the costs of that. Your availability guarantee, which we'll go into a bit more detail later. Transparency of maintenance, and this is really important. What you want to know what is happening on your plant and what the team are doing, and that they're reporting to you on a regular basis of exactly what's going on. Key is the location of the service provider. So I said up above that the contractor is constrained by the availability of staff. So if they are servicing more than one plant in the vicinity and are having to travel to you, if they're not based on site, then you lose valuable time in them responding to issues on the site. Also the size of the team, one person can only do so much. So making sure that you've got an appropriately sized team for the size of your plant. I've listed here what an all-inclusive agreement should include. I'm not going to read through it now because we're going to go through some of this in a little bit more detail as we go. You can go on to the next one, Kim. The term is also something that's important to discuss. I think the panel will look at this a bit later, but generally you're looking at 5, 10, 12, 15-year contracts, particularly in the South African market, because of risks that the lenders see, and that they want longer term service providers contracts on site. Ensure that you have break clauses in those contracts. So it's well and good signing up for 10 to 15 years, but you need to be able to change that service provider if needed. Always hope for the best, plan for the worst is the best thing with contracts. We've chatted about when is commencement. And the risks with long-term contracts is that often that prices for things come down, particularly for O&M services, as a market matures and there's competition in that space. So you'll have signed up to something for 10 to 15 years and may well be able to procure that at a cheaper rate in the life of the project. So that's a key risk with the project. And then what aspects of the project have a shorter term than that initial 5 years, say, so your power curve warranty, your noise warranties under a wind farm, your performance ratio availability warranties for a solar farm, but we'll discuss those again a bit later. Okay, Kim, next one. So yeah, I've put in here the warranties that are key that you define up front and have very clearly. So power curve, availability and noise under your wind, and your performance ratio and availability, and making sure that you have your liquidated damages negotiated. So there's a few hangovers from your initial supply agreement, and really we'll talk again about end of warranty inspections, but your ability to claim on these warranties is much higher under your supply contract than it is under your O&M contract. Your O&M contract is generally, the liabilities are capped at 100% of the annual fee, which obviously is much less than what you paid to buy the equipment. So you need to make sure that you spot anything that's wrong or needs to be remedied before your supply warranties run out. In terms of, actually, no, I'm not going to go into detail on each of them. You can go, Kim. I think it's easier for people to read them. Go to the next one. So we discussed availability, and again, because I have so many slides, please feel free to read, but essentially what to look at when you're looking at availability warranty is it's not versus the total amount of time that your plant is running. There's a lot of exclusions that are built into an availability warranty, so you need to be very clear about what the definition is. So it's that your total time minus excluded times, generally times for scheduled maintenance. Generally, there's a ramp-up period at the front, at the beginning of the project lifetime, and other. I think if you go to the next one, Kim, other exclusions that are put in place. I'm going to do the key ones for the key list here is for solar plants, but applies in the majority of it applies to wind. So looking at force majeure, damage that's caused by a third party. So being very careful about who operates and maintains the equipment that's not the OEM. Grid disruption, so managing that as well. And all of these can't be allocated to your O&M contractor. it's important then that you track what is and isn't available so that you can claim. There's two different types of availability as well. There's a time-based one, which we just discussed, and then an energy-based, which a lot of projects are moving towards now. And that takes into consideration that if there's a higher wind period or a period of higher irradiance, that it's more valuable to you as the owner than ones with slightly lower wind or irradiance, and therefore the calculation takes not time, but energy lost into consideration, which incentivizes the O&M contractor to do their maintenance at low resource times rather than just when they want to. Okay, can keep going, Kim. Payment mechanisms, basically base price and then escalation. There's often availability bonuses for meeting, for exceeding the guarantee. Again, yeah, let's just skip through this one because I think people can read this, but it's important to understand what you're paying for and how and when you'll be available or you'll be liable for those bonuses. These are some of the risks I mentioned before that follow through from the initial supply agreement and that you want to kind of keep an eye on over the first couple of years. So your design and defects are a particular one. You'll have a defects notification period for the first 2 years where you can claim any issues that occur on the equipment from the manufacturer. There's the general warranties that are down at the bottom related to that, including workmanship and quality of material. And then a key one is also serial defects. So if there are a significant number of parts or parts of the equipment that fail, and there's very specific definitions for this. So it needs to be manufactured in the same factory. It needs to be over a certain percent in exactly the same turbines globally, but it's something that is really worth negotiating and having in the contract. Okay, next, Kim. Reporting, so you can jump through to this. What I've given you in these slides, and again, not to dwell on it, is a list of the key performance indicators that you ought to be tracking as a manager or an operator of a site. The first 2 slides, and Kim, if you, I think, skip through 1, 2, go to the 4th one where there's a table. That's a bit easier and gives a, yeah, here. So this basically splits it into different areas, but essentially you are looking to report, either you are tracking them as the asset manager or your O&M provider is providing information on all of these KPIs so that you can understand how they're performing versus their contractual obligations. So raw data measurements, and these ones are solar, but irradiation or wind resource, and then your energy produced and consumed. Consumed is a bit of a best practice, but the other 2 are minimum requirement for what you're looking for on under your KPIs. And then for the plant itself, what is the yield that you had forecast versus what is the yield that's actually you're getting on the site, both for solar and for wind. Here is performance ratio, but for wind, you'd be looking at the availability as well. And then also tracking what your O&M contractor is doing, which is something that is often forgotten. So how long is it taking them to respond to things? What is the downtime on your equipment? How are they managing your spare parts? So how long is it taking them to then repair equipment? So these are covered under these KPIs, and then your environmental KPIs as well. So tracking what is happening, both environmental and health and safety are key KPIs for you to be tracking. Okay, next one, Kim. Maintenance strategies, again, just in the interests of time, I won't go through each of these slides, but basically when there are a few different strategies that you can take to managing a project. So this, the chart at the top, your choices are there's preventive maintenance and corrective maintenance. So preventive maintenance means you are preempting works that need to happen on the project and therefore minimizing the downtime associated with any breakages. Corrective means let it fail and basically fix it once it's broken. There are issues associated with that in terms of the downtime that you will suffer as a result of it, and also the issues linked to it. So if you let, for example, on a wind turbine, a gearbox go until it fails, there's subsequent failures and impacts on the rest of the turbine, and that you then have to repair as well. So preventive maintenance really is important for the site to maximize the production of the equipment. And you can do this in a couple of ways. So see here, condition-based maintenance and predetermined maintenance. Condition-based maintenance requires you to have quite a lot of finger on the pulse of the data and the activities that are happening on your site. So tracking all of that and analysis of how equipment is operating, but worth putting in place from the beginning of your site operating, so that you're then building up a database of failures and failure rates, and how your equipment behaves. Kim, I think then what you'll see is a bit more detail on all of this as we go through. So if you go 2 slides forward, I mentioned that looking at preventative maintenance, you need to understand what's happening with your equipment. What I've given you in these slides is a distribution of the downtime. So this is for a wind turbine, where the majority of the breakdowns occur. And you'll see gears and generators forming gears, control system generators forming the top 3. But it's important also to understand not just the percentage of equipment that breaks down, but the related loss in energy that it causes, so that you can allocate resource appropriately. So I've given you this for the wind turbines, and then Kim, if you can scroll through, there's some data on downtimes per failure in terms of hours. And then if you go to the next one, I've done the same thing from some research reports, and this is based on solar projects. So again, you'll see here on the right-hand side is the total failures, and the left-hand side is the energy loss. So the majority of failures are actually related to the monitoring system, but those don't give you a huge amount of energy lost across the solar project. Then if you look on the slide at the bottom, it's gone into a bit more detail of the equipment in the modules. So the modules have the highest failure rate, but second in terms of the energy loss, that the highest energy loss is due to failures in the junction box. So these are things that you need to be managing and monitoring over the life of the project, and trying to prevent failures occurring when you are trying to generate energy. Okay, next one, Kim. Thanks. Okay, then we're just going to go briefly into spare parts management. I think one of the key things that operators leave to the O&M is management of the spare parts. And so just a kind of a brief thing about why it matters, and this links to what we were just discussing about downtime. As often the question is, well, if your parts aren't available, isn't that covered under your availability warranty, and would you be able to claim under the O&M contract? The question then is what you lose versus what you're reimbursed. And so in the next slide, if you can just go through to that, Kim, I've just given you an example on a wind farm of a blade failure. So it often costs much more in lost revenue. If the blade isn't in stock, you're going to have lead time for manufacturing, say 100 days, transportation time, assuming that you don't need to get permits and go through customs and things like that, 20 days, installation another 3, again, assuming you can get a crane on site. Then you add your labor, your crane hire costs. So it becomes a significant cost to you as the project. And depending on the size of the project, it may or may not affect your availability warranty, right? If you've got hundreds of turbines and only one is down, it may not have a big dent on that percentage availability, but it will have a big cost to you as the project. Sorry, it's not finished on this one. And then you'll see in the point down below, just looking at an example of a bearing problem, say $1,000 to repair a bearing, which can lead to $100,000 gearbox replacement. Then you need to rewind the generator and the associated crane hire. So one post-warranty gearbox failure can cost about 10 to 15% of the turbine cost. So it's worth managing and tracking not only your the downtime, but also that you have spare parts available and that you're able to respond to any failures as rapidly as possible. Okay, can go. I've tried to then in this, and this is just alternatives to O&M, and right now in the market, there's not a huge number of companies that are providing third-party O&M services, but it is something that happens globally. So as an owner, you can choose a strategy depending on what your risk appetite is. So either going with the original equipment manufacturer, going with a third party, or self-performing, and a lot of larger utilities and IPPs do this. And then I think, Kim, you can just skip the next one. I've given you just some of the types of warranties that you can get with those options. We had then chatted earlier. You can go to the next one, Kim. Thank you. Then chatted earlier. I said about I was going to go through end of warranty inspections. So if your initial warranty from the supply agreement ends at 2 years, the question then is, why would you have an end of warranty inspection? Because the O&M contractor is going to be on site for 5 years, and do you really care? Because you can still claim. As I said, the thing is that you have access to much greater liability under the supply agreement than you do under the O&M agreement. The other thing to bear in mind is that you want to understand what is likely to reduce performance of your plant over the rest of the lifetime of the plant, and not just take the OEM's word for that in the first 2 years. So it's very important that you do this, as important as doing the inspection post-commissioning of a plant, which we always do and don't question, whereas an end of warranty inspection often is something that it's difficult to persuade companies to agree to or find costs for. You can go to the next slide, Kim. I've just put in here kind of the recommended process. Again, but just because it's something that's difficult to get companies to agree to, it often gets left till the last minute. And the thing is, you want to be able to claim. So you need to do it at least 3 months prior to the end of the warranty period. So you have the inspections completed, the reports completed, and then submitted to your OEM if there's any issues that they need to remedy before they disappear off site. And in terms of the recommended process I've put on here, it's a discussion that you need to have. So don't approach it as an argument. I think that makes things difficult to remedy then, but presenting them with anything that you found on site that is their responsibility to remedy prior to the end of the warranty. Kim, sorry, I think there's a duplication with these next 3 slides, so you can skip then to the asset management one, and then I'm done. Next one. Yeah, so asset management. So I said at the beginning, there's different areas under the O&M that you need to look at. So I've given you some of the tasks that fall under the operations and maintenance, and some of the tasks that fall under the asset management. And the asset management really is primarily making sure that everything on site happens. And yeah, sorry, Kim, you can go to the next one, because it's so I've given you here again a definition of what's an asset, but really asset management is coordinating all of the activities and practices which an organization optimally and sustainably manages its assets and systems. So you're basically trying to maximize performance, minimize risks and expenditures over the life of your project. So it's quite a complicated role, involves a lot of different parties and stakeholders. And it's something that is often, I think, taken for granted, the value that it adds to a project. In the next slide, you can go, Kim. First rule, and again, sorry, this applies to wind farms for this one, but first rule of operating wind farms is keep them spinning. So really, you want your plant to be available and operating for as much time as it possibly can, because that's generating you revenues. And as an asset manager, it's your job to ensure that. From the point of view, I've put just down here some of the goals as an asset manager is you want high availability, you want to reduce the cost for service and repair, and you want to ensure a long lifetime for your equipment. You don't want to have to keep on replacing equipment over your 20-year life. And then from the point of view of you as an asset manager / operator, is you're trying to ensure that there's a short reaction time in case of failures. So as we chatted about the downtime, you're trying to minimize that. You can then be responsible for detecting problems on your own and then managing the O&M contractor to ensure they respond appropriately. And doing this by scheduling inspections and preventative maintenance when appropriate. Often you'll get a facility operating plan from the O&M contractor, and that doesn't necessarily reflect the weather on site, if there's high radiation, if there's high wind. So managing all of those movements on site. And then finally, data. You have access to your monthly reports and your SCADA system from your OEM, but often we don't delve into the detail of what we actually have available. And really that statistical analysis of all the available data is very important as an asset manager to help you guide your decision-making process. Okay, whistle-stop tour through O&M. So hopefully it wasn't too fast, but please feel free to ask me any questions or ask to the panel, who also will, I think, will cover some of the topics.
Good. Thank you very much for that, Chanda. A very informative presentation, and well done on keeping to your time. A lot of information in that short amount of time. And I think it's all required information for us to better understand asset management, operation and maintenance, which is quite complicated and extensive. Once again, just to the participants, please keep your questions going. Thank you for those of you who have already posed the questions. Maybe just to note that Chanda will join the panel after the panel discussion for the Q&A session as well. So some of the questions will be posed to her at that point. Yeah, and good, let's move on. So you see our esteemed panel of speakers up on your screen. I'm going to ask for each of them to please switch on their cameras. Kim, can I ask us to take down the slide presentation so we can see the speakers? I think the facilitator of this session is my friend and co-host, Ms. Ntobifuthi Ntuli, the CEO of SAWEA. I don't think she needs much more of an introduction. So I will hand over to her to introduce the rest of her panel, and they will together be discussing how to successfully operate and maintain renewable energy assets. They will be looking at the challenges and opportunities within the space, and they'll also be talking to the lessons learned to optimize renewable energy plant longevity. Over to you, Ntobi.
Thanks so much, Niveshan, and thanks, Chanda, for a very educational presentation. We're certainly learning a lot from the sessions, and I'm sure our audience would agree to that. So like Niveshan has already said, today, because it's our last session, we decided to take a slightly different approach in the way we present. And I'll be joined by a panel of very esteemed speakers who are going to take us through and share their experiences in the operation and maintenance of either solar PV or wind projects. So first we have Lindan Buthelezi, who is a technical manager at Dopa Wind Farm. He joined Dopa in 2019, and his experience in renewable energy industry is specifically in technical operations management of wind farms. It actually spans over 5 years, and he's got a very strong passion for data-driven operations and improved asset optimization and performance. And then next we have Tom Goss. Tom is a team leader for planning at Vestas Southern Africa. He's been with Vestas for 6 years, and he covers areas such as adhering to all contract obligations related to O&M, as well as business process improvements. He has successfully done commissioning planning for 6 of Vestas operational assets. We are also joined in the panel by Ramona Mohanlal, who is the head of operations and HR at Rustmore Solar Farm. Ramona is an operations expert. She has worked in many industries, including energy, entertainment, gaming, NPOs, and she also has an experienced project manager. She has several projects across the industries that she has worked in. She has a very well-rounded HR knowledge and economic development experience, and she's currently pursuing her MBA. Last but not least, we are also joined by Crompton Saunders, who is an asset director at Globelec. Crompton is a registered professional engineer with a master's in engineering management. He has been working in the engineering field since 2008 and joined Globelec in 2014 and has occupied different positions in operation and maintenance up until now, when he is now an asset director for DR Solar and Droogfontein Solar, where he is responsible for key O&M and asset management services. So that's my panel for today. And I'm sure most of the questions that the audience might have related to Chanda's presentation might actually be answered in this discussion that we're going to have. So I'd like to kick off with a question to Lindani. So as a plant is handed to you after construction, Lindani, what are the main lessons that you can share regarding the transitioning from construction to full operations, and how would you advise someone to better manage this process?
Good afternoon, Dombi, and your co-host, Kim. And thanks for the question, and I do appreciate having been invited and just to share my experience on wind energy. I just want to add that Chanda has done a very good job. It's fantastic, couldn't have been better. She's covered everything really, really well. And yeah, I'll just try and answer that question. And I've seen some of the questions come through on the Q&A. I might answer one or two of them from my response already. But generally what you want to achieve when you transition a project from a construction phase to an operation, I would say, I think as an asset owner, what you really want to do is when you approach operations, you need to have sort of a life cycle approach to operations and not view it as we have a 5-year agreement with the service provider. So when you as an owner yourself have that sort of idea in your mind, it actually makes things a little easier, that you actually think quite far ahead. So because the transition from operation generally is full of things which are legacy issues from construction. So what you really want to do is you want to make sure that all those issues which relate to end of warranty, as how Chanda has explained, are fully closed off. So in doing that, you need to first understand your contracts. So you need to understand the EPC contract normally is the EPC contract. You need to understand your operations contract, which is your O&M agreement. Because generally on your EPC contract, you would have a lot of liability which can be covered under that contract. So once you understand that, then you know exactly which are the things you would want to drive through the transition into the operations contract. And in my experience, I have found that a lot of the times the O&Ms, and excuse anyone who is an O&M, yeah, but a lot of the times the O&Ms like to sort of downplay a lot of the issues that are in the EPC agreement, and they want to almost make you believe that it can be taken care of under the operations and maintenance agreement, which is fair enough. I think it is fair enough. However, if you fail to properly record the data and ensure that the items are notified in line with the contractual requirements, there's very little you can do when the project is ongoing to force the contractor or the O&M provider to actually do that work for you. So I think it's important to really check your contract and ensure that everything is covered. And with that, it may be worthwhile to also request your O&M provider to even go as far as providing a bond to ensure that if they do not do the work, you can go out in the market and get someone with similar expertise do the work for you. I don't think anyone has reached that extent in the industry as yet. I think the OEMs that we have in South Africa have been quite open-minded and have really done a good job, generally speaking. But I think it's a good thing from a contractual point of view, because you have also your shareholders, your lenders, which you also need to appease and you need to make them happy. So that is one of the important things to ensure in the transition phase. The other thing is just to check who is responsible for what. Generally, during construction phase, you would find that the contractor is responsible for about everything, you know, your health and safety, your environmental aspects, liaison with all the other stakeholders, including ESCOM, so things like grid code compliance, etc., etc. They would all be fully responsible and liable. When you have that transition, it's important that you really check the contract and check especially the O&M agreement to see that all the things that are not covered under that agreement, you have put contingency measures in place to ensure that these things are taken care of. Typically, just to answer one of the questions on the Q&A, the end of warranty or defect liability period.
Okay, let's wait a bit with the Q&A questions. Can we wait a bit with the Q&A questions?
Okay.
We're going to come back to that.
No problem. All right.
Because you spoke about the relationship between the asset manager and the OEM providing the O&M service. I would like to bring in Tom, as he represents an OEM, into the conversation. Maybe he does agree with you on those things, but specifically, Tom, if you can just explain to us, as you are responsible for operations and maintenance, what is a typical day for an O&M team look like, and what exactly is involved in the O&M of a wind farm? And also, how do you ensure that the annual maintenance schedule is performed within agreed timeframes?
Yeah. Good day all. Hi, Ntomifiti. Thank you for the opportunity. And also thank you for Shanda for the great presentation that she's covered. I think she's covered most of the things. If I may respond to the Nelani, I think a daily, a normal day in operation, first of all, we need to ensure that we adhere to all the safety protocols that has been set in place. When we look at the operational side of the turbine, we need to ensure that we provide the necessary skills and training to our technicians to ensure that we assign the correct people to for the task. Then secondly, with regards to the maintenance, what we normally do is we have local warehousing in place to ensure that materials are being delivered on site in time. And working that back, we normally request for materials to come to site earliest than 9 months before maintenance commence. So we also have various systems that we use, especially when it comes to the improvement of the turbines, which I believe that what we do is we look at failure rates of previous turbines. We have dedicated teams assigned to these protocols. And if we do not have a dedicated person locally, we do have customer engineers, customer support engineers that will technically support our guys with the functions. But I think the most important is to give our commitment to the client. So give our commitment to the asset, and as Shanda mentioned, that we lower breakdowns, so troubleshooting turnaround times at a high efficiency rate. And the most important part is training our personnel. So we do train our guys each year. We do have awareness training for them to uplift the skill. And what we normally do is we give the client events report on what has been done on site. So that is basically a day in the life of operations. I do know there are some things that cannot be resolved within a day, but we do strive to give the best we can. Lenana, I hope I answered you.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's interesting, but I suppose the audience also wants to know a day in the life of an O&M expert in a solar farm. So I'll bring in Crompton into the conversation. just to take us through some of the what is involved in operation and maintenance in the solar PV assets.
Thanks, Ntombi. So yeah, thanks everybody. Great to be here. First of all, I see there's quite a lot of colleagues, fellow board members, consultants, service providers on the call, so I have to be careful about what I say. So I will be measured in my responses. But yeah, I think first of all, what's interesting about these assets, and for us who are in the industry, automatically get to experience that. But I think for people who are not, these assets are quite fascinating. It's not just O&M and asset management. It's a mesh of commercial, technical, financial, processes and systems that work together on an ongoing basis to make these assets deliver the value that the shareholders are expecting. On the operations front, on a solar plant, I think maybe an interesting perspective on O&M would be to just, I think, maybe draw it back to the sort of development cycle, because I think a lot of decision making in development has an impact on what happens in operations. And again, my approach to my job in general is a very systems approach. So I will always take a bit of a broader perspective on things. And I think what's really important in most businesses is, and specifically in our industry, is there's always competing priorities between teams that design these plants, build these plants, and then have to operate them afterwards. There's different incentives for each of those teams. And depending on how well these businesses are integrated, could dictate how well those interactions between those various teams work, and ultimately result in a better product that can be run more effectively during operations. And some of the stuff you typically have to think about during the design phase to support operations. Again, there's no one size fits all for each business. If you have multiple assets, one of the things that you could be looking at is, if I have a fleet of assets that will be relatively close or in the same region, looking at standardized equipment, because that can help make doing maintenance much easier. You can use the same teams over a broad geographical area. You can share spare parts, makes commercial relationships with suppliers much easier, etc. It's also important to consider sort of where a plant could be in terms of designing for maintainability. Going with one main grid transformer instead of two, low loss versus normal loss transformers. Understanding the impact of those different design choices, because if you've got one main transformer, if you lose the transformer, the plant's out for an extended period of time. If you go with a large number of transformers, you've got more equipment to maintain, but you lose smaller areas of the plant when you do have failures. So in the design phase, it's important to go and consider those different design options. Take some time to do the relevant modeling, understand what the CapEx, OpEx, and operational implications of those things are, to make the best decision going forward.
Okay, maybe following on to that question, there's also a question of the industry is maturing, and what sort of standards or best practice guidelines are available to help improve operational maturity? Because I suppose O&M, when the plant is new and when the plant is in its next decade of operation, is not the same. Do you have any comments around that?
Yeah, so I think the solar industry is maturing is maybe a strong word. It's definitely growing in maturity, in the sense that the solar industry is really only at this stage about 6 or 7 years old from a utility scale perspective. And a lot of the experience we've gained in South Africa, I think has been very valuable in I think maturing the general skills that's available in the industry around technical management, but also I think just general management of these assets. From a more formal perspective, I think Chanda mentioned the Solar Europe O&M best practices that's been developed. So that process has been ongoing for I think at least 3 or 4 years already. So there's a set of best practices developed by the Solar Europe, which is like SAPVIA or SAWEA for the European market. So they've developed a set of standards which they call Solar O&M best practice. They've got the asset management best practice. They've done work on developing EPC best practices. And as Chanda has mentioned, they have sort of modified some of that specifically for the African market. And then there's some of the other usual suspects in the States, like NREL, who's also developed a suite of best practices. And then I think just from personal experience, very early on, Global specifically used the ISO 55000 asset management standard, which again is a broader standard that covers asset management and O&M. But as I said, these things are very integrated. It's very difficult to split them. So taking the standard, applying, looking at best practices in other markets like mining that's been around for some time, using local and international renewable experience to develop a framework that's focused on renewables, and then continuing the process of sort of assessing again standard and best practices and maturing your own internal organizational functions where it's relevant for you in terms of the renewable sector. So there are definitely a few things out there that's for people to help them navigate and improve maturity.
Thanks for that, Quentin. I want to shift the conversation from technical to other elements of asset management in the renewable energy space. Ramona, maybe to bring you into the conversation, obviously managing a solar farm is not only about technical operations, but it also involves managing community relations. Does your business find challenges in communities, in the communities in which you operate, and how do they impact on your operations and especially on your bottom line as a business?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Ntombi, and good afternoon to everyone listening in, and thank you to my fellow panelists. So I have the very, very great privilege of being part of one of the older solar farms in the industry. For those of you that don't know, Rasmo was actually the first PV plant to connect to the grid. And we actually have entered year 8 for our operations. And I think that's important in that means we've maintained a relationship within the community that we operate in for that amount of time. And I'm happy to say that we've managed to maintain a relationship that is mutually beneficial, simply because community members that were involved in the actual construction of Rasmo, some of them still work in our plant today in different roles. We also have engaged the community in terms of making sure that our community development elements look out after the communities around us. We're based in Marikana, which we also know has challenges with the communities. And I think the two important things that I would say that have helped Rasmo is that there's always open communication. So whatever Rasmo might be doing, whether it's additional construction, changes in the way we do things, or just letting the communities around us know of anything that's going to happen that might impact them, the communication lines are always open. Second to that, we always making sure that all of our other stakeholders, be it our lenders, be it our shareholders, are always involved in some fashion in anything that we do in the community. And I think that it's of the utmost importance that we have the communities around our plants involved. they create a community around your plant in terms of safety. I'll give you a perfect example. During the start of the hard lockdown for COVID-19, Rasmo shut itself down in terms of isolating staff on the plant. And it was a first for us, a first for everyone all over the country, all over the world. And our plant was safe. And I think that's because of the relationship that we have with the community and the fact that they are engaged and they feel that Rasmo is part of them.
No, thanks so much for that. It's always nice to see projects working very well with communities, because I mean, if you're planning to be with this community for 20 years, obviously you need to build a mutually beneficial relationship. Maybe just to move on to just discuss slightly a relationship between management and O&M contractors. Are there any challenges that the plants face currently with regards to that management between the asset owner and the O&M contractors, Ramona?
So I think once again, I'll say here that it's all about communication and keeping those lines of communication open. Our O&M contractor is also they were the same company that was the EPC. So the relationship moved from the construction to the operations and maintenance of the plant pretty smoothly. I wasn't there at the time, but from what I've understood, the relationship has always been a good, positive one. And I think from Rasmo's point of view, once again, there's always that open line of communication between all of the stakeholders involved. So anything that is happening in the plant, there's never a feeling that someone can't call you up after hours on a Friday with whatever issue there might be. The challenges, I would say, could possibly come in if there's too many people involved. And the way Rasmo has managed to make sure that all of that is streamlined is that we have our specific people within Rasmo and our O&M contractors that deal with specific things. So there are certain people within Rasmo that can give instructions at certain levels, the same with the O&M contractor. And I think that has helped us to streamline the efficiency of the relationship. Thank you.
Oh, great. And then maybe sticking with the challenges, I'd also like to know from you, Lindani, what are the main technical challenges that one can expect to experience in operational wind farm from your experience, and what have been the causes? And most importantly, how do you resolve those?
Okay, thanks, Tommy, for the question. Yeah, wind farms are very beautiful machines. I think they are capable of really operating really smoothly if they are well taken care of by both the O&M and the asset owner has got a vested interest. But maybe to answer your question, the main challenges that we have, or rather that I know of within the industry, and that is thing that we have also experienced in other OEMs that I know, they relate mainly to the major components, which are the blades, the gearboxes, the main bearings, not so much foundations and tower, but it's really around the drivetrain components and the blades. And on the blades, it's purely, generally from what I've seen, purely related to lightning strikes. We have seen some sites get really bad strikes. In fact, our site is one of those sites that is quite severely affected by this. But from the other components perspective, it is main bearings, gearboxes, sometimes main converters, which are basically the grid integration equipment. And you also do find other challenges, just minor challenges due to day-to-day issues like the pitch system, or there may be issue with the hydraulic system, etc. And what we have found is that the main causes on just generally mechanical and electrical system could either be due to a manufacturing defect or due to a maintenance issue. So the maintenance was not conducted adequately, or it could be due to the way that the machine has been operated in the conditions. So those are the three main drivers, if I may say. But I think the other thing which is generally, for me, that I found that is quite a key driver to especially availability, which is influenced by how well your machines are being run, is the people factor. You know, if you have the right people in your site, both from the O&M and the asset owner point of view, and from the asset owner purely to provide the oversight, you know, and do the inspections and check that the work is being done on time, and ensure that the owner's interests are kept at site level. It's very important, and I think it's quite fundamental. You know, if you have the right people, you are almost assured that the asset will perform well. But yeah, those are really, in summary, the main technical challenges. It's major component related, and also on the minor things, day-to-day things, where it's generally related to people. I don't know if I've answered the question.
All right. No, thanks. I was actually going to ask a follow-up, but I'm just going to direct it to Tom.
Okay.
As an OEM, do you experience any challenges with main component replacement, as Lindani has highlighted that as one of the key challenges, especially in terms of availability and of critical spare parts at the time that you need them? Tom?
Thank you for that, Ntombi. Yes, yes, I can agree with him on some of the concerns raised. I think for us, it's basically with regards to the skills when it comes to a third-party service provider which needs to replace the main component for us. As I mentioned, for us, the challenge was before when we didn't have all of the skills transfer, but like I said, we've managed to train our guys. So it's basically when you have ad hoc and you have expertise type of jobs as plates, you know, you cannot just replace the plate. So there should be certain repairs done. And as an incoming market in South Africa, we have tried now to train most of our guys in order to do this blade repairs, to do the main component replacement. I think mostly for us, the challenge comes into when you have to use somebody with that can operate a crane, because those are external companies which we do not provide that service for. On a day-to-day basis, I think we have managed that well now, because what we are now currently doing, as I mentioned, we're working with our technical support team to having the guys up to the preferred knowledge in order to fast track and also lower the downtime. But as I mentioned, that it will always be there, since we do not have the services yet of owning our own crane, and which also, when you look at local content, and this is where we render these services out, because we also need to give some development back to most of the subcontractors. That is all for me.
Tell me, do asset managers able to recover? Are they able to recover from the financial loss experience as a result of downtime? I'm talking about unplanned maintenance.
Can you just repeat it? I didn't get it.
I'm asking if asset managers, and maybe not for you, maybe for asset managers, if they're able to make up or recover from the financial loss that is experienced as a result of downtime. Maybe there is an unplanned maintenance that needs to be done.
It's, Ntombi, it's quite tough at times to cover. I think in wind specifically, you know, I think most wind farms, specifically in South Africa, have struggled to hit P50, you know, consistently. So I think that's the first issue, is that, you know, you're always on the back foot. The second thing, you know, once a failure occurs, there's very little else you can shift around to either, you know, reduce maintenance that you're planning later the year, because, you know, that could also have a negative effect. So, you know, the ideal is never to push out maintenance, or, you know, but sometimes there's an opportunity to push out larger capex projects. You know, so maybe you had, you know, Eskom you needed to install a filter for grid code, and you know, get some mechanism of just pushing it out into the next financial year, you know, and not spend that money in that specific year. So it will always, you know, more be a different financial mechanism that you use opposed to trying to generate more revenue, because that's quite difficult in our industry. It's not like a gas plant where it's much easier to do.
Okay, no, thanks for that, Compton. And maybe you can tell us a bit more, because we've up to so far spoken about challenges with the wind farms, but in the solar plants, do you experience different kinds of challenges in the O&M phase?
Yeah, and I think interestingly, there'll obviously be very similar, there's a lot of similarities between wind and solar. And I think just, again, I think I often laugh or giggle to myself when people say technical challenges, because it's normally technical, commercial, you know, starts off technical, but very quickly becomes a commercial issue, specifically in the first few years of the plant life. But yeah, I think obsolescence is quite a challenge. You know, as Ramona said, we also have a couple of the very early round one plants, sort of, you know, operating very early from 2014, already experiencing key issues with obsolescence. And, you know, part of the challenge is obviously there's been a lot of movement in the solar market with players leaving the market, you know, selling their businesses. So obsolescence has become quite an issue, because, you know, some of these designs, early designs, were very custom. It's not off the shelf. You know, it really, you know, adds to the complexity when you have key components like
that's a big concern. That's a big concern, because parts availability, when companies go,
it's huge, and not just parts, but also the you know, the skill, the know-how about the technology. You know, so, you know, if you were, you know, bought from smaller players at the time, and they've disappeared or were integrated into other businesses, it's difficult to find those people that can support. We can spend the whole discussion just on obsolescence, but I think some of the other key challenges, I think terminations has been quite an interesting one, you know, whether it's terminations on the substation, switchgear, whether it's, you know, in the field on the transformers, or, you know, the remain units. Terminations have been a continuous issue. And that's for a number of reasons. I think, you know, just quality control during construction, I think was a challenge. You know, often the vibration that the equipment causes wasn't taken into consideration, you know, effectively to, you know, maintain the terminations. Yeah, and, you know, cables were installed to taut, you know, so there's quite a few issues, reasons for termination issues, but it's been quite a significant issue in the sector, and something, you know, again, we are trying to pay quite a close attention to in new plants. And then other issues, and for time I'm just going to whip through some of them, but ventilation has been a key issue for us, specifically on solar. A lot of the early plants were designed with the inverters and transformers inside of a kiosk or a building, and the ventilation design is not adequate. So, you know, that results in overheating and premature aging and failure of equipment. So having to do a lot of retrofit work on ventilation systems. And then again, I think transformer issues are also quite prevalent, you know, either undersizing, heat management issues, poor quality construction, which, you know, leads to gassing and leaking, and so again, quite challenging things to manage in operations. And yeah, and I think the interesting one is, you know, comms and plant controller issues. So comm systems are so key because, you know, it helps you understand what's happening on the plant. You know, is my equipment functioning? What's the performance like? I can't detect underperformance if my communication systems are, you know, to the inverters are not working because of poor design, and being taken out by lightning, you know, on a continuous basis, or, you know, not having sufficient redundancy. And then the plant controller issue is quite significant. You know, a lot of plant controllers I think being custom designed, not off the shelf. You know, I think when grid code testing was done back in the day, you know, grid code was there, but the procedure and understanding what we needed to check and how we do it, you know, wasn't done properly. So there was a lot of things that slipped through the cracks, which are now come home to roost in the grid code retesting, which I think is putting a lot of pressure on farms around controllers specifically, that has to be ripped and replaced, or you're struggling to find the you know, the guy in the company who originally implemented the controller, and you know, then you still have to revert to just ripping everything out. So that's been quite challenging.
All right, no, thanks for that. Actually, speaking of grid code, I wanted to ask Ramona, what sort of, because I understand the grid code is updated on a regular basis. What sort of challenges do operational plants experience when it comes to adapting to the ever-changing grid code rules, or I don't know, whatever you call it?
So Rasmo's already been through its first you know, grid code compliance retesting, and we were fortunate enough to come through it successfully. And I think the key there was that there was a continuous oversight from the side of the asset manager and of course the O&M contractors, where all of the maintenance was done as scheduled, and we made sure that all of the parts we needed, there were always spares for it. And we also made sure that all of the relationships were there. I think the biggest challenge we found, fortunately enough, was actually the weather. You know, to get a day that was compliant in terms of the weather. I think the key to making sure that all of these things go well, obviously taking into account everything Compton has said with regards to the movement of technology and how parts may have become obsolete, and manufacturers no longer possibly are in the business, is to make sure that the maintenance is always aligned, that, you know, even though you've got an O&M contractor with quite a tight contract, there has to be oversight from the owners of the asset themselves. And I think if maintained regularly, we should all be able to get through that retesting quite simply and easily.
Yeah, okay. No, thanks to all panelists for, I think you've really empowered us with a lot of knowledge from your experience. But I would like to bring in some of the members of the audience to ask the questions. So Kim, please assist us here. I would like to take Sinokolo Kutu to ask her questions to the panelists, please. If you can just promote it to panelists, and Sinokolo, please open your video and microphone and go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ndomvuti. Good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, before I ask my question, I just want to say thank you for the informative presentation by Chanda, and of course the information that was dished out by the panelists. So my question was in particular, or rather my questions are two of them in fact. One in particular was with regards to the warranties, supplier warranties, in terms of the duration of the warranty from the inception, or it does start at the point whereby the project itself, if you are building, for example, a wind farm. So obviously you'll have each and every one of those units kicking in at different times during the EPC process. So when does now the warranty start of that particular asset? Is it when it kicks in, or when the whole project has been officially handed over to the O&M company that will be doing the operation and management of, or maintenance thereof, of that particular wind farm? Thank you.
I think any of the panelists can take that.
Okay.
Danny.
Go ahead, Chanda. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do a bit. So it's normally 2 years, and then so what I said in that it depends on what you negotiate in your contract. Some projects it is for the entire plant when it reaches COD, and for others it can be on a turbine by turbine basis or a string by string basis, which is a nightmare. Don't do it. It makes your life awful. I don't know if anybody else wants to join in, but yeah, it depends on what you negotiate in your contract. Generally, the warranties they'll last 2 years from whatever date it is that you've negotiated, is the average.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it depends. It can be 2 years, it can be 5 years, and then also sometimes each piece of main equipment has different warranty periods attached to it. So, for example, typically, let's use a common one like PV modules. So PV modules inherently have a manufacturer warranty, which, I think normally for the first couple of years, any issues, sort of sits on the EPC to resolve. But post that, the warranty gets ceded to, the project company, and whatever the terms on that warranty, remains is then still intact directly with the manufacturer. But it's very seldom where it's, and modules are interesting because they typically have 10-year, sort of general warranty, for delamination and, junction box issues, and then also a longer term warranty around performance, which can be quite difficult to prove in any case. So
All
yeah.
right. Yeah, thank you. I'll take the next question from Dumile. Is Dumile still with us? Okay, if not, I will take the next question from Mamulo Dotlavela. Kim, are you winning?
I think Dumile is on now, Tombi.
Dumile is on. Okay, thank you. Okay, Dumile, you can go ahead.
Hi, and thank you for a wonderful session to all. My question is just around the degradation factor when one is doing proper maintenance, proactively so. I just want to know, to what extent does the preventive maintenance improve or affect degradation factor basically? Thank you.
Hello. I hope I'm
yes, go ahead, Mamulo.
I can be heard now.
Yes.
You can hear me.
You can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
My name is Mamulo. Yes, my question is, won't it be wise that the EPC contractor be the one that goes forward to do the O&M to avoid the gray area of not honoring the agreements between the O&M as well as the EPC? That's in short, yes.
All right, thank you. I'll hand over to the panel members to answer the two questions.
Yeah, so I think on the first question, just to clarify, I'm assuming you was referring to solar PV, more, which I think it's got a more,
yeah, I think so. You spoke about degradation factor.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm assuming it's PV. I know wind turbines also have a degradation factor, but it's not really discussed that much in industry. Yeah, so first of all, I think determining the degradation factor is quite difficult because of sort of high error tolerances in measurement equipment and measuring sort of performance degradation in operations due to the way PV modules work in a table. So so it's quite difficult to measure what the real degradation impact is on an annual basis on a PV plant. Now, typically during a year, you do some module replacements, you know, and that would vary from if you have a relatively healthy field to, you know, 0.1% of modules to up to 2% of modules. If you have really major issues with modules on an ongoing basis. But even that number in terms of replacement is too small to really, I think, counter any meaningful degradation in the field. But general maintenance won't really have a significant impact on countering degradation on an ongoing basis. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question. And then the second question on EPC O&M, you know, I think there's always pros and cons to everything in life. If you've got an EPC contractor which becomes the O&M contractor, it's also easier for them to sweep things under the rug. So, you know, if there are major challenges during construction, you know, key issues, it's easier for them to hide it because, you know, if it's the same company becoming the O&M contractor, you know, they can support each other in making sure, you know, those issues don't come out and you don't get a chance to raise any defects in the warranty period. So yeah, but you know, it could be a mechanism to you know, also keep that business around for longer, to make sure that, you know, you if you do pick up issues, and that's why I think it's quite important that even though you do have an O&M contractor that you know, it's the same company as the EPC, you have your own resources on site that can technically understand, assess the plant on an ongoing basis and make sure that they discover any challenges which needs to be managed, you know, once that O&M contractor leaves.
All right. I think the last question, there's a very interesting question from anonymous attendee. So we can't promote them to ask their question, but I'm just going to read it out. Can the panel comment on painting one turbine blade black or red as a mitigation for bed collision impacts? It has been said that this may raise weight or warranty issues, but this should no longer be a barrier to testing this promising mitigation. It has been done on wind farms internationally, and hopefully will be trialed soon in South Africa. 2 operational facilities are seriously considering this. I'm going to put Lindani on the spot as an asset manager for wind farms. Over to you, Lindani.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. We have not explored this before, but I am aware that Global has. And maybe Compton, you want to help me here. I think one of the barriers to that was air traffic control, because when you start to paint the blades black, you know, they've got issues with that. They would rather have a different color. I think the color was red, but that doesn't really help the situation. I don't know if Compton, you want to help me with this one, but we haven't really looked into the painting of blades, but I know I've heard that other people are looking at it.
We're also still looking at it as an option, so not made the decision to go ahead. But I think, Chanda, you are probably better placed than anybody else to know what's been happening in the broader industry around the blade painting.
I think one of the issues is the EIA and getting that across the line, because it changes your visual impact. And it's only been done, I believe, on 1 wind farm globally, but I stand to be corrected. So I think it's something, well, I think there's a couple of questions that you need to ask. How big is the impact of the bird collisions on your site? Because not all sites have significant issues with birds, so you don't necessarily need to go down this path. And there's a lot of monitoring that's put in place on the projects that do have these issues that wouldn't necessarily lead to you then having to go and paint the turbines. I think there's a few things that need to be taken into consideration. I don't know any, or I haven't come across projects that are looking at it in the South African market, to be honest.
No, thanks for that. And yes, it is something that is an ongoing discussion in our environment working group. There are projects that are planning to trial that, and we're just gonna wait for the trial and see. But BirdLife South Africa is basically saying that until they can see the impact of that as a mitigation measure, they're not sure if it's effective. So then the onus rests upon us as an industry to trial it and show the results. Okay, so I've got a question from another. Okay, I've got a question from Shagula Shikongo. Can I ask him to promote him to ask his question? Maybe while Kim is busy with that, I see Sinoxolo's hand is up. Do you want to ask a question or comment?
Yes, Domfuti. I think it's just a follow-up question specifically to Ramona with regards to skills development. I mean, given the fact that renewable energy is still a very young industry when it comes to South Africa, although globally in parts like Europe and America and China, they've actually advanced it to some significant level. Now looking at this, I wanted to ask a question of what specific strategy or measures have been put in place in order to promote skills development and job creation in the areas where these plants operate, be it a PV plant, be it a wind farm. So what strategies or measures are put in place to promote skills development in these particular areas?
Thank you for that, and that's quite an interesting question, and it's quite relevant. And for Rasmo specifically, we have had a strategy that was in place from the start of the plant. As I said earlier, when it came to EPC, there was already community members involved. In terms of skills development, we have hired from within the community, and even our security guards that we have upskilled into those positions of being security supervisors have been developed within Rasmo. We are very fortunate in that even our O&M contractor does get involved in upskilling community members as well in the actual O&M functionality. The process is not always as simple to get people to the level that we need as quickly as we would hope. So the hope obviously is that the skills development levels will get that much higher. So we'll find people from local communities that have the ability to do the higher level technical skills and be able to be sitting next to Compton the next time around to share their skills and how they've been developed. And that would obviously come from a skills transfer point of view as well. In terms of uplifting the communities, there is a certain percentage of what we do that pours right back into the community that we work in, from building infrastructure to, we've built an ECD, we have supported clinics with PPE, we have given people meals when that was necessary. So the community outreach from an education to a social point of view is always there. And it's a commitment that we are not only obligated to, but we are quite happy to be involved in. I hope that answers that question.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Ramona. Shagula Shikongo, you had a question on the Q&A. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, everybody. Shagula here from Windhoek, Namibia. Thank you so much for the platform, and we wish we have similar platform here back at home here in Windhoek.
Well, you can create the platforms.
Yeah, yeah, I can create
Ask Kuda Kwashe to do that.
I would do so. Well, what we're basically working on here, just to give you a brief description of what we're basically doing, is we're trying to explore what are the potentials of offshore wind in Namibia, most especially here in Loderet. And I needed to find out what are the current advancements when it comes to exploration for offshore wind in South Africa. Has there been any players that have stand out to say that we will be busy working on this as well? So yeah, just want to find out on that. Thank you.
All right. Maybe I can take this one because I had a long chat with one of the developers last week. After I said there are no offshore wind developers, I was actually corrected. There are a couple of developers who are exploring development of offshore wind in the country. Early stages, of course, but they have a backing of large companies from overseas. And I know of a company as well that used to be our member that was doing a pre-feasibility study for offshore wind development. Biggest issue, of course, is the fact that our shores are very deep, and therefore we need to use floating foundations for offshore developments. But because we have the technology now, there is a huge possibility for that to happen. I'm not sure if in the next 10 years we're going to see an offshore wind farm, but I know there are development activities happening. And maybe one of the panelists have a better answer to that. All right. I want to wrap up the Q&A session, but there's an interesting question here. Oh, okay, I see Ramona is busy answering that, so I am not going to go to that. So thank you also, panelists, for answering some of the questions that I have skipped through because I thought they just need one word answer and it doesn't need a discussion. So if you can assist us with that. I'm gonna do one last round to all the panelists because I have one question to ask all of you. What are the opportunities available for small and emerging companies that want to participate in the O&M of either solar PV or wind that are looking for opportunities to position themselves, especially as we are going into the growth phase of IRP 2019 implementation? Then we'll do each one of the panelists, including Chanda, and then after that, I will hand over to my co-host, Niveshan.
Okay, maybe I can start, Domi, if you allow me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, opportunities in the space. Just from a high level, from an engineering point of view, there's just a huge drive now that the industry is maturing towards a more condition-based and proactive-based maintenance approach. You know, I think the entire industry is looking for South African solutions. You know, we find that some of the things we are seeing here for the first time. So from a consultancy point of view, I think there is an opportunity for South African engineering consultants to venture into maybe upskill themselves and venture into the consultancy of specifically on wind systems, you know, looking at condition monitoring in the sense of vibration measurement on drivetrain components, looking at condition monitoring in the sense of oil sampling, etc. So I find that that space is still quite young and people can really exploit that area of operation. But over and above that, I've also found that specifically on wind farms and the blades, if I may be actually very specific, there's a very limited number of contractors operating in the blade repair space and blade inspection space. So I think there's still a large scope. Looking at round 5, which will come on soon, you know, the number of blades just increases. For every turbine, you've got 3 blades. So that's basically the exponential rate of the increase of the number of work that's needs to be done on that. So yes, there are opportunities with maintenance, supporting on the electrical balance of plant, which is a transformer and the substation. We have seen that a lot of the contractors have focused a lot on that. But for me, I would just share just those main ones, which is the blades and the condition monitoring and the engineering support. And the other panelists can give more input. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Lindani. Who wants to go next?
Thanks, Lindani. I think I agree with Lindani that there's definitely a great opportunity for growth and exploration of anyone that would be interested in the industry, because there are definitely markets that could be expanded. I also think that, once again, and I feel like I've harbored on this point the entire panel, but I think that relationships are key. And I think that's probably where any new entrants to the market are going to have to make sure that they find strengths, because a lot of us have relationships with all the contractors, be it the O&M contractors or even the people that maintain our cameras and fences, whatever the case may be. So I think that there has to be a knowledge of the industry, there has to be a knowledge of the challenges, the pros, the cons, and I think it also hinges a lot on, can you get a status and level of relationship with all of the people in the market that already exists with the current contractors that are in play? Thanks.
Thank you. Crompton, Tom, Chanda.
Domi, yeah, I think this is quite a challenging topic, because it's much more challenging than it sounds. Speaking about it and making it happen, I think is quite difficult. And maybe just to look at, I think, an example of where this has potentially happened well, and to use a solar example, I think it's also being used more on the wind now, but back in 2014, everybody was doing handheld IR scans on PV plants, which was absolutely useless. Took a lot of time, didn't offer, quite a lot of value for effort. And until, drones have become more commonplace to scan plants. So, on none of our plants, we do any more handheld scans. And I think there's been fantastic examples of companies like, I think GeoSunhawk 62, who stepped into a space, and I think, have put in the effort to, I think, improve their capability, and service offerings, not just in South Africa, but, also in the rest of Africa. So I think in the digital space at the moment, there's I think, good opportunities. I think, as Lindani said, around predictive, preventive maintenance. But I also think it's important to understand that, it's easy to latch onto jargon about, digitization and, AI and machine learning. But, the real applications of these things in our industry is not as easy as it sounds. Everybody's trying to sell you something which will offer you the world, but never really does that. So I think there's a bit of an opportunity for, I think, sort of a bit of a niche consultancy for people to get comfortable with, I think, data streams that come off these plants, looking at stuff that, is sensible, not try and look at 1 million data tags when you only need 10 to really tell you the real story. And to be able to build, algorithms that, I think, look at the value areas. So, for example, on a solar plant, looking at string level, being able to detect underperformance, looking at blade pitch, being able to understand if there are issues, and building that into, very simple, usable systems that can, I think, be useful to better understand and how we manage these plants. So I think there's the opportunity.
Thank you. Additional comments? Do you have anything, Tom, Chanda, before I hand over to Nivesh?
Just one maybe. I think that digitalization and AI is very cool. There's also deeply uncool areas that there's opportunities. Cleaning panels, not cool, but someone has to do it and be paid for it, right? And if you can provide a good service with an understanding of panels, and that's not just at utility scale, right? You need to think all of the CNI rooftop, who's looking after those and who's monitoring those, cutting grass. I know it's not thrilling, but it is a business stream, right? And so I think we also need to, there's a whole wide range of things that need to be looked at for an asset that that there are opportunities. Yeah.
Thanks, Chanda.
And Tomifuti, yes, just one thing for me that I want to raise. I agree with both Compton and Lenolando. There is growth for potential. I think, however, when you're looking at expertise and training involved, there is a challenge of getting people trained to do this specialized tasks. But I think going forward, we have partnered with some of the training centers to get people up to the skills level. It will take a bit longer, but there are some programs in place. And also having partnered with local service providers, contractors, in order to work more with people around the neighboring wind farms and also uplifting skills development. Yeah, that's all for me.
All right, thank you so much, panelists. And this is how I wrap it up. And thank you so much for all your insights and sharing your experience with our audience. We really appreciate it. And we've got exciting things coming up at the end of the series, and Niveshan is going to tell you all about it. But from me, thank you, and I'm going to hand over to Nivesh.
Thank you very much, Ntombi. I think a lot of great information being shared today. So thank you to all of the panelists for covering such a variety of topics in such detail that it actually allows people to better understand this space of asset management, operations, and maintenance. So basically, as you all know, 7 months ago, SAPVIA and SAWEA embarked on this journey to have this joint information sharing webinar series. It was for the first time, and we think that we've been extremely successful in this. So we hope as an outcome of this series of webinars, we've been able to inspire emerging project developers and create more interest for meaningful local participation in renewable energy. Some key success indicators on your slide will show that we've managed to bring together 4 associations, this being SAPVIA, the Solar PV Industry Association, SAWEA, the Wind Energy Association, BEPA, the Black Energy Professionals Association, and REEF, the Renewable Energy Entrepreneurs Forum in South Africa. We hosted 7 very well-planned sessions. We provided 15 hours of pure information from real learnings over the last 6 months. We covered 28 topics in total with 38 speakers who are seasoned industry leaders and experts. We saw excellent participation with just under 3,500 registered participants across the 7 webinars and just under 2,000 in full attendance. This is around an average of 284 attendees per webinar. And we definitely don't want to forget our 11 partners and sponsors who helped make this possible. So a big thank you to the IPP office, firstly, who worked with us as industry and opened up this series to start with. Our sponsors, UV Renewable Energies, Mainstream Renewable Power, who were both series sponsors across all 7 webinars. And then Standard Bank, Norton Rose, ED Platform, WKN Wind Current, and Hamilton Renewables, who sponsored specific webinars and specific topics. I would also like to thank the SAPVIA and SAWEA teams working behind the scene. Ms. Kim Thomas, I'm sure all of you have heard from her many a time. Ms. Marilisa Stoltz, Ms. Chanda Kumalo, Mr. Lindo Sibia, and not forgetting Ntombi and myself. So Ntombi, I'll congratulate you and I'll let you congratulate me later. In terms of our service provider who assisted in managing and marketing the series, it's a company called Zani, led by Ms. Nokwanda Nzimande. Thank you for all of the hard work, and a shout out to a young Black woman-owned professional service provider. So anyone looking for assistance in webinars, marketing, and comms in general, this is the service provider that I would recommend. Before we go, I would also like to announce the 2 new webinar series that are coming up over the next 6 months. So the first one in partnership with SAWEA again, and I'm really happy to be handing over the reins to our colleagues at SAWEA who will be leading this initiative. We'll be launching the Developing Local Supply Chains series of webinars. The dates and topics are to be announced and will be shared and circulated soon. And then the next webinar series is a SAPVIA initiative, and this will be launching the Driving Distributed Generation series of webinars. The dates and topics are on the slide. More information will be supplied shortly after this series closes. In that, I would like to thank again the speakers. Thank you, Ntombi, thank you to the sponsors, and thank you everybody for participating.
Thanks, Niveshan, for a great initiative. I think we have made sure that we put the industry together to impart the knowledge that is sitting within the industry, and I hope South Africa has benefited a lot from the series. And thank you so much to all the participants, and we look forward to having you in our next series of webinars. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.